My ex-husband called me at 1 a.m., something he hadn't done in years. Marta, don't go home. Go to a hotel. Now. I started to argue, but he cut me off, his voice firm. Just trust me. 5 minutes later, police cars were speeding past me, heading in the direction of my house. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The shrill ring of my phone at 1 in the morning cut through the silence like a blade. I fumbled for it in the darkness, my heart already racing. Nobody calls at this hour unless something terrible has happened. Hello? My voice came out hoarse, thick with sleep. Marta, don't go home. I sat up straight in bed, suddenly wide awake. It was Damien. My ex-husband hadn't called me in 3 months, not since we finalized the paperwork on selling our shared vacation cabin in Lake Tahoe. What? Damien, what are you talking about? Listen to me carefully. His voice was steady but urgent in a way I'd never heard before. Don't go home tonight. Go to a hotel. Now. I rubbed my eyes, trying to make sense of this. It's 1 in the morning. I am home. I'm in bed. No, you're not. You're at Sarah's, remember? You told me last week you were staying over to help her with her mother's estate. He was right. I was at my sister Sarah's house, had been here for 3 days helping her sort through Mom's belongings. But how did he know I was planning to drive back tonight? I hadn't told anyone. How did you— Marta, please, just trust me on this. Go to a hotel. The Marriott on 5th Street. Check in under your maiden name. Don't go to your house tonight. The urgency in his voice sent chills down my spine. Damien had always been calm, measured. Even during our worst fights, even when we were signing the divorce papers after 25 years of marriage, he never sounded like this. You're scaring me. What's going on? I can't explain right now. Just please do what I'm asking. I'll meet you at the hotel in the morning and explain everything. I threw off the covers and walked to Sarah's guest room window. The street was empty, bathed in orange streetlight. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. This is insane, Damien. It's the middle of the night. Why can't you just tell me? Because there isn't time. His voice cracked slightly. Marta, in 25 years, have I ever asked you to do something without explaining why? I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. He was right. Damien had always been the type to explain everything in exhausting detail. It was one of the things that drove me crazy about him. The man couldn't buy a carton of milk without researching the best price per ounce. No, I whispered. Then trust me now. Please. Something in his tone, a vulnerability I hadn't heard since the day he moved out, made my decision for me. Okay, I'll go to the hotel. Thank you. The relief in his voice was palpable. And Marta, don't call anyone. Don't tell Sarah where you're going, just go. The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my phone. 3 years ago, when Damien asked for the divorce, he said we'd grown apart, that we wanted different things. Irreconcilable differences, the papers said. We'd been civil, even friendly during the proceedings. We split everything fairly, kept the same accountant, still exchanged Christmas cards. But this felt like something else entirely. I dressed quickly in the dark, grabbed my purse and overnight bag, and crept downstairs. Sarah was a heavy sleeper, and I didn't want to wake her with questions I couldn't answer. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Had to leave early. Emergency at work. We'll call tomorrow. The drive to the Marriott took 15 minutes. The night clerk, a young man with tired eyes, barely looked up when I requested a room under my maiden name, Patricia Wilson. I hadn't used that name in 28 years. How many nights, ma'am? Just one, I hoped. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like an eternity. Room 412 was at the end of a long hallway that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and someone's leftover Chinese takeout. I sat on the edge of the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at my phone. Part of me wanted to call Damien back, demand answers. Another part wanted to ignore his warning entirely and drive home to my own bed, my own coffee maker, my own life. Instead, I found myself thinking about the last few months of our marriage, how Damien had become increasingly distracted, taking phone calls in the garage, staying up late on his laptop with the screen angled away from me. I'd assumed it was work stress. He'd been promoted to senior accounts manager at the insurance company, handling more complex cases. Or maybe another woman. I'd wondered about that too, though I never found any evidence. The divorce had been his idea, but he'd never mentioned anyone else. Never remarried. According to mutual friends, he wasn't even dating. At 2:30 in the morning, I heard sirens in the distance. Multiple sirens getting closer. I went to the window and pulled back the heavy curtain. The hotel overlooked the main boulevard that led to my neighborhood. 3 police cars raced past, their red and blue lights painting the empty street in urgent colors. Then an ambulance. Then 2 more police cars. My blood turned to ice. They were heading toward my street. I grabbed my phone and called Damien, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. The sirens faded into the distance, but the silence they left behind was somehow worse. I paced the small hotel room, my mind racing through possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Had someone broken into my house? Was there a fire? A gas leak? How did Damien know? And why hadn't he warned me sooner? I must have fallen asleep in the chair around 4 in the morning, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the window and someone was knocking on my door. "Marta, it's me," Damien's voice, but different somehow, heavier. I opened the door to find my ex-husband looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually neat brown hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. They held a weight I'd never seen before, a knowledge that had aged him years in a single night. "We need to talk," he said quietly. I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he automatically checked the hallway before closing the door behind him. When had Damien become the kind of man who checked hallways? He sat heavily in the chair I'd vacated, running his hands through his hair. "How much do you want to know?" "Everything." The word came out sharper than I intended. "Start with why police cars were racing toward my neighborhood at 2:30 this morning." Damien looked up at me, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. Guilt. And beneath that, a sadness so deep it took my breath away. "They found evidence that someone was planning to break into your house last night. Evidence of preparation." Preparation for what? His hands clenched into fists on his knees. "There are things about our marriage, about our divorce, that you don't know. Things I never told you because I thought I was protecting you." I sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling very far away from everything familiar. "What kind of things?" Damien met my eyes, and I saw 25 years of shared history there, along with something else, something that looked like fear. "Someone has been watching you, Marta, for a very long time." "Watching me?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean, watching me?" Damien stood up and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside to scan the parking lot below. The simple action sent a chill through me. This wasn't the man I'd been married to for 25 years. This man was careful, vigilant in a way that spoke of real danger. "Letters," he said without turning around. "Phone calls where no one spoke, just breathing. Flowers delivered to your work with no card. Small things at first. Things that could be explained away." My mouth went dry. "When did this start?" "About 6 years ago." He finally turned to face me, and I could see the exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "Maybe longer." I didn't recognize the pattern at first. 6 years ago. I tried to think back, to remember anything unusual. There had been some strange calls. I remembered that now. Wrong numbers, I'd assumed, and flowers at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. My colleagues had teased me about having a secret admirer. "You knew about this for 6 years and you never told me?" Damien sat back down, his shoulders slumping. "You were already stressed about your job. The hospital was cutting staff, and you were working double shifts just to keep your position. You'd come home exhausted, and the last thing I wanted to do was add to your worry, so you decided to handle it yourself." I decided to figure out what was going on first. I thought maybe it was just some harmless person with a crush. Hospital staff deal with grateful patients all the time, right? Someone whose life you saved, maybe. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warm hotel room, but it wasn't harmless. No, it wasn't. Damien reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers. He hesitated for a moment, then handed it to me. I've been documenting everything. Every incident, every pattern I could identify. The police have copies of all of this now. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of photos, photocopied letters, and what looked like surveillance reports. The first photo showed my car in the hospital parking lot. Someone had taken it from a distance, but the license plate was clearly visible. The second photo made my blood freeze. It was me, walking out of the grocery store completely unaware that someone was watching. The timestamp showed it was taken just 2 weeks ago. "Oh my God," I breathed. "There's more." I flipped through the stack with growing horror. Photos of me leaving work, entering my house, even walking my neighbor's dog when she was out of town. Whoever was taking these pictures had been close enough to capture the expression on my face, the color of my clothes, the books I was carrying. The letters were worse. Typed on plain white paper, they started innocuous enough. "I saw you at the store today. You looked tired. You should take better care of yourself." But they became increasingly personal, increasingly invasive. "You always buy the same brand of coffee. Dark roast, no cream. I remember you liked it sweet when you were younger. When I was younger." My hands shook as I read that line again. Damien? This person? They knew me before? That's what I think. Look at the last few letters. I found them at the bottom of the stack, dated just 3 months ago. The tone had shifted from observation to something more possessive, more demanding. "You've been alone too long. It's not natural for a woman your age to live by herself. You need someone to take care of you. Someone who understands you the way you deserve to be understood." The final letter was dated 2 weeks ago, just before Damien called me last night. "I've been patient. I've watched and waited, hoping you would notice me, hoping you would remember. But you walk through life like I don't exist. Maybe it's time to remind you that some people never forget. Some people never give up." I dropped the papers, my hands shaking too badly to hold them steady. "This is insane. Who would do this? Why?" Damien gathered the scattered documents, carefully placing them back in order. "I've been working with the police for the past 3 months. Detective Rodriguez in the stalking and harassment unit. Last night, they finally got a break." "What kind of break?" "Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, called 911 around midnight. She saw someone in your backyard, trying the sliding door to your patio. When the police arrived, the person was gone, but they found tools, lockpicks, a glass cutter, rope. The room seemed to tilt around me. Someone had been trying to break into my house. If I'd been home, if I'd followed my original plan to drive back from Sarah's last night." "How did you know?" I asked. "How did you know to call me?" Damien was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "I've been monitoring the police scanner for months now. Every night, I listen to make sure there are no calls about incidents at your address." "You've been listening to a police scanner every night?" "I couldn't sleep anyway." His voice was barely audible. "Not knowing someone was out there, watching you, planning something. I'd lay awake imagining all the things that could happen." I stared at this man I'd been married to for 25 years, seeing him clearly for the first time in a very long time. The weight loss I'd attributed to stress, the dark circles under his eyes, the way he'd started calling me more frequently in the months before the divorce, always with some excuse to check in. "The divorce," I said slowly. "It wasn't really about growing apart, was it?" Damien's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like he might cry. "I thought, if we weren't married anymore, if I wasn't living in the house, maybe whoever was doing this would lose interest. Maybe they'd stop focusing on you if it looked like you were alone, available. You destroyed our marriage to protect me from someone I didn't even know was there? I couldn't protect you while pretending everything was normal. I couldn't keep lying to you about why I was installing new locks, why I wanted you to vary your routine, why I didn't want you working night shifts anymore. You were starting to ask questions. The full scope of what he'd sacrificed hit me like a physical blow. Our house, our shared life, our future together. He'd given it all up, and I'd spent 3 years thinking he just didn't love me anymore. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Because I knew you. His voice was thick with unshed tears. I knew you'd insist on handling it yourself. You'd refuse to change your life, refuse to be afraid. You'd probably want to confront whoever was doing this directly. He was right. That's exactly what I would have done. And now? I asked. What happens now? Damien stood up and walked back to the window, that same careful surveillance of the parking lot. Now we wait for the police to do their job. They think they know who's been stalking you. Who? Someone from your past. Someone who's been carrying a grudge for a very long time. He turned back to me, his expression grim. They found something else last night, Marta. Something that connects this to a case you were involved in years ago. My mind raced through possibilities. In 30 years of nursing, I'd dealt with hundreds of patients, thousands of family members, some grateful, some angry, some looking for someone to blame when things went wrong. What kind of case? Damien's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at me. Detective Rodriguez wants to meet with us this morning. She has more information. More information about what? About who's been watching you, and why they've decided to stop watching and start acting. The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. I looked at the manila envelope full of evidence, at this man who'd sacrificed everything to keep me safe, at the hotel room that had become my refuge from a danger I never knew existed. Damien, I said quietly, what else aren't you telling me? He met my eyes, and I saw the answer there before he spoke. I'm afraid we're running out of time. Detective Rodriguez was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with sharp eyes and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that comes from dealing with too many cases like mine. We met her at the police station downtown in a small conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. Mrs. Patterson, she said, extending her hand. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. I shook her hand, noting the firm grip, the way her eyes studied my face like she was cataloging details. It's actually Mrs. Wilson now. I went back to my maiden name after the divorce. Of course. She gestured for us to sit at a scarred wooden table. Your ex-husband has been very helpful in our investigation. The documentation he provided has been invaluable. Damien sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the tension radiating from his body. Have you made an arrest? We're getting there. Detective Rodriguez opened a thick file folder. But first, I need to ask Mrs. Wilson some questions about her time at St. Mary's Hospital, specifically about a patient named Marcus Holloway. The name hit me like a slap. I hadn't thought about Marcus Holloway in 15 years, but hearing it now brought back a flood of memories I'd tried very hard to forget. You remember him, Detective Rodriguez observed. Yes, my voice came out smaller than I intended. But that was a long time ago. 15 years, maybe more. 16 years to be exact. You were his mother's primary nurse during her final stay in the ICU. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the images that came flooding back. Eleanor Holloway, 68 years old, admitted with complications from diabetes. Sweet woman, always worried about being a burden. And her son Marcus, who visited every day, who questioned every decision, who seemed to think that if he just argued loud enough, he could will his mother back to health. She died, I said quietly. Mrs. Holloway died on my shift. Tell me about that night. I looked at Damien, who nodded encouragingly. It was a Wednesday night in October. Mrs. Holloway had been stable for 3 days, but her blood sugar spiked around 10 p.m. Dr. Morrison ordered an insulin adjustment, but she went into hypoglycemic shock before we could stabilize her. The memory was as clear as if it had happened yesterday. The alarms going off, the crash team rushing in, Eleanor Holloway's son screaming at everyone to do something, to save her, to not let her die. Marcus blamed you, Detective Rodriguez said. It wasn't a question. He blamed everyone. The doctors, the nurses, the hospital administration. He said we'd killed her through negligence. But he focused on you specifically. I nodded reluctantly. I was the one who administered the insulin. Even though it was doctor's orders, even though I followed protocol exactly, Marcus insisted it was my fault. He said I gave her too much, too fast. Did he threaten you then? Not exactly threatened. He was grieving, angry. People say things when they're in that kind of pain. I paused, remembering the wild look in his eyes, the way he'd grabbed my arm outside the hospital that night. He did say something about how I'd taken away the only person who ever loved him, that someday I'd know what that felt like. Detective Rodriguez made a note in her file. Did you have any contact with him after that? No. The hospital security escorted him out after the funeral arrangements were made. I never saw him again. But he saw you. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? Detective Rodriguez pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed a man in his 50s, thin and balding, with the kind of pale complexion that came from spending too much time indoors. His eyes were what I noticed most. Intense, focused, with an unsettling quality that made me want to look away. Is this Marcus Holloway? I asked. Taken 2 weeks ago outside your workplace. He's been documenting your routine for years, Mrs. Wilson. Your schedule, your habits, the people in your life. I stared at the photo, trying to reconcile this older man with the grief-stricken son I remembered. He looked smaller now, but there was something in his posture, in the way he held himself, that spoke of barely contained rage. He's been watching me for 16 years? On and off. We found evidence that he's moved several times, always managing to end up within a 50-mile radius of wherever you were living. When you moved from Sacramento to your current address 5 years ago, he moved too. Damien leaned forward. You said you found tools at Marta's house last night. Was he planning to hurt her? Detective Rodriguez's expression darkened. We found more than tools, Mr. Patterson. We found detailed floor plans of your house, Mrs. Wilson, schedules of your daily routine, photos of you sleeping, taken through your bedroom window. My stomach lurched. He was in my yard before last night, many times. We found evidence of repeated trespassing going back months, footprints in your flower beds, scratches on your window screens where he'd been trying to see inside. The room felt like it was spinning. All those nights I'd slept peacefully in my own bed, never knowing someone was watching through my window. All those mornings I'd gotten dressed, showered, lived my life, while a stranger documented my every move. There's more, Detective Rodriguez continued. We found a storage unit rented under an alias. Inside were hundreds of photos of you, detailed journals documenting your activities, and what appears to be a shrine. A shrine? Photos of you arranged around a hospital photo of his mother. Candles, flowers, personal items he'd somehow acquired over the years. I felt bile rise in my throat. What kind of personal items? A coffee cup from the hospital cafeteria with your lipstick on it. A pen you'd dropped in the parking lot. A scarf you donated to the hospital charity drive 3 years ago. Each item she mentioned felt like a violation. This man had been collecting pieces of my life, building some twisted memorial to his obsession. But why now? Damien asked. Why did he decide to escalate last night? Detective Rodriguez glanced between us, her expression carefully neutral. We believe something triggered him recently. A change in your life that he perceived as an opportunity. I thought about the past few months, trying to identify what might have changed. The divorce was finalized 3 years ago. I haven't started dating anyone. I still work at the same hospital, live in the same house. Actually, Detective Rodriguez said carefully, we think it might be connected to your ex-husband's recent behavior. Damien stiffened beside me. What do you mean? Mr. Patterson, you've been monitoring Mrs. Wilson's house, haven't you? Driving by at odd hours, parking across the street to watch for unusual activity? My head snapped toward Damien. You've been watching my house? His face flushed red. Not watching, checking, making sure everything looked normal. How often? Detective Rodriguez asked. Every few days. Sometimes more if I was worried. Marcus Holloway noticed. We found entries in his journal expressing anger about a rival who was interfering with his surveillance. He became convinced that someone else was competing for your attention. The full implications hit me like a freight train. He thought Damien was trying to get back together with me. More than that, he thought your ex-husband was the reason you weren't responding to his attempts to communicate. The flowers, the letters, even some gifts that apparently never reached you. What gifts? We're still investigating, but we believe he left items on your doorstep that were removed before you could find them, probably by well-meaning neighbors or delivery personnel. I turned to Damien, seeing him in an entirely new light. You weren't just monitoring police scanners. You were actually watching my house. I couldn't help it. His voice was thick with emotion. I knew someone was out there, and I couldn't protect you from a distance, so I'd drive by, just to make sure your lights were on, that everything looked normal. He saw you as an obstacle, Detective Rodriguez continued. Someone who needed to be eliminated before he could approach you directly. Eliminated? I repeated, my voice rising. You mean he was planning to hurt Damien? We found detailed surveillance notes about your ex-husband's routines too. His work schedule, his apartment, his regular haunts. But the immediate threat was to you, Mrs. Wilson. We believe he was planning to break in last night while you were sleeping. The conference room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I tried to process everything I'd learned, but it felt like trying to hold water in my hands. Every time I thought I understood the scope of what had been happening, it got bigger, more terrifying. Where is he now? I asked. We're actively searching for him. He hasn't been to his apartment in 3 days, and his car was found abandoned near the interstate. But Mrs. Wilson, I need you to understand something important. I met her serious gaze. This man has been planning this for years. He's organized, patient, and completely obsessed with you. Just because we interrupted his plan last night doesn't mean he's given up. What are you saying? I'm saying you're still in danger. Until we have Marcus Holloway in custody, you can't go back to your normal life. I felt Damien's hand cover mine on the table, warm and steady. How long are we talking about? Days, hopefully. Weeks at most. But you'll need to stay somewhere safe, somewhere he can't find you. I looked around the sterile conference room, at the files full of evidence of my stalker's obsession, at Damien's worried face, and realized that my life as I knew it was over. There's something else, Detective Rodriguez said, hesitating. Something we haven't told you yet. My heart sank. What now? We found evidence that Marcus Holloway isn't working alone. Not working alone? My voice came out as barely a whisper. What do you mean? Detective Rodriguez opened another section of her file, revealing what looked like communication logs and phone records. We've been monitoring Marcus Holloway's activities for the past month, ever since your ex-husband first brought his concerns to us. What we discovered is that Holloway has been in regular contact with someone else, someone who's been helping him track your movements. I felt Damien's grip on my hand tighten. Who? We're still investigating, but we believe it's someone with access to your personal information, someone who knows your work schedule, your medical records, possibly even your financial information. The implications of that hit me like a cold wave. Someone I work with? It's possible. Or someone with legitimate access to hospital records. The level of detail in Holloway's surveillance logs suggests he's had help from someone on the inside. I thought about my colleagues at St. Mary's Hospital, people I'd worked alongside for years, Janet in administration, who always remembered my birthday, Dr. Morrison, who'd been there since I started, the younger nurses I'd trained, who looked up to me like a mentor. This is insane, I said. These are people I trust, people I've worked with for decades. I know this is difficult, Detective Rodriguez said gently, but we need to consider all possibilities. Holloway couldn't have maintained this level of surveillance on his own. Someone has been feeding him information. Damien leaned forward. What kind of information? Schedule changes, when you were working overtime, when you'd be out of town. Last month, when you took those 3 days off to help your sister, Holloway knew about it in advance. He was positioned outside your sister's house within hours of your arrival. My blood turned to ice. He was watching Sarah's house? We found photos. You gardening in her backyard, carrying boxes to your car, even sleeping in the guest room. He had a clear view through the window. I thought about those peaceful days at Sarah's, sorting through our mother's belongings, feeling safe and surrounded by family memories. The whole time, Marcus Holloway had been watching, documenting, planning. There's more, Detective Rodriguez continued. We found evidence that he's been inside your house before. Inside? Damien's voice was sharp with alarm. At least twice that we can confirm. We found his fingerprints on items that had been moved slightly from their original positions. Nothing missing, nothing obviously disturbed. But he'd been there. I felt violently ill. When? Once about 6 months ago when you were working a double shift at the hospital. The second time was 3 weeks ago when you were at that nursing conference in San Francisco. The conference. I'd been looking forward to it for months. 3 days of workshops and networking with colleagues from across the state. I'd stayed at a nice hotel, attended lectures, even had dinner with old friends from nursing school. How do you know? Security footage from your neighbor's doorbell camera. We can see him entering through your back door around 2 a.m. and leaving approximately 3 hours later. 3 hours? I couldn't comprehend what someone could do in my house for 3 hours. What was he doing in there? Detective Rodriguez exchanged a look with her partner, who'd been silent throughout our conversation. This is where it gets particularly disturbing, Mrs. Wilson. We believe he was staging. Staging what? Creating scenarios. We found evidence that he moved through your house methodically, spending time in each room. He photographed your belongings, your personal items, even your clothing. I felt like I might vomit. The thought of this stranger touching my things, going through my private spaces, made my skin crawl. But that's not the worst part, Detective Rodriguez continued. We found evidence that he was practicing. Practicing what? Based on the positioning of certain items, the way furniture was slightly rearranged and then put back, we believe he was rehearsing an abduction scenario. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Abduction. He was planning to kidnap me? We found detailed floor plans of your house with notations about sight lines, escape routes, and what appeared to be timing calculations. He'd mapped out the most efficient way to move an unconscious person from your bedroom to the back door. I couldn't breathe. The conference room felt like it was closing in around me, the walls pressing closer with each horrible revelation. Mrs. Wilson, Detective Rodriguez said gently, I need you to focus. Can you think of anyone at the hospital who might have had access to your schedule? Someone who's shown unusual interest in your personal life? I forced myself to think past the horror of what I'd just learned. There's a new administrator, Tom Bradley. He started about 8 months ago. Handles scheduling for the nursing staff. He's always been friendly. Asks a lot of questions about how I like working there, whether I'm happy with my shifts. Anyone else? Dr. Sarah Kim in psychiatry. She's consulted on a few of my patients over the years. Always very thorough, asks detailed questions about my observations. I paused, trying to remember. Actually, she asked me about my time off recently. Said she was thinking of taking a vacation herself and wondered how I managed to get consecutive days approved. Detective Rodriguez made notes. We'll look into both of them. Anyone else who's had access to your personal information? I thought harder, going through the faces of people I interacted with regularly. The cleaning crew has master keys to all areas of the hospital, including administration offices where our files are kept. And there's been some turnover lately in the records department. What about outside the hospital? Anyone who's shown unusual interest in your daily routine? I thought about my neighbors, the people at the grocery store I shopped at regularly, the gas station attendants who knew me by sight. My mailman, Jerry, retired last month. The new one, I don't know his name, but he's asked questions about whether I live alone, whether I travel much. Every person I mentioned felt like a potential betrayal. These were people I saw regularly. People I trusted with small talk and casual friendliness. The idea that one of them might have been feeding information to my stalker made me feel paranoid and violated. There's something else we need to discuss, Detective Rodriguez said. Your safety going forward. She can't go back to her house, Damien said firmly, not until this guy is caught. Agreed, but it's more complicated than that. If someone at the hospital is involved, Mrs. Wilson can't return to work either. Not until we identify who's been helping Holloway. My career, my home, my entire life, everything was being stripped away because of one man's twisted obsession. How long? I asked. We're hoping to have answers within the next few days. Holloway can't hide forever. And now that we know he's had help, we can focus our investigation on the people with access to your information. And if you don't find him quickly? Detective Rodriguez hesitated. Then we'll need to discuss more permanent relocation options. The word relocation hit me like a physical blow. She was talking about witness protection, about disappearing from my life entirely. This is all because I did my job, I said, my voice rising with anger. Because I followed a doctor's orders and gave a patient the medication he prescribed. Because a woman died on my shift 16 years ago, and her son can't accept that sometimes people die in hospitals despite our best efforts. I know this seems incredibly unfair, Detective Rodriguez said. But obsessions like this aren't rational. In Holloway's mind, you're responsible for the most traumatic event of his life. He spent 16 years building up a fantasy where confronting you will somehow give him closure or revenge. What kind of confrontation? Damien asked, his voice tight with worry. We're not sure. The evidence suggests he's been planning something elaborate, something that would give him extended time alone with Mrs. Wilson. The abduction scenario was just the first step. I didn't want to know what came after the first step. I didn't want to imagine what Marcus Holloway had been planning to do once he had me isolated and helpless. There's one more thing, Detective Rodriguez said, and I could tell from her tone that this was the worst revelation yet. We found a timeline in his apartment. He's been working toward a specific date. What date? October 15th, the anniversary of his mother's death. I felt the blood drain from my face. October 15th was next week. He's been planning this for 16 years, I whispered, waiting for the right anniversary. Detective Rodriguez nodded grimly, which means he's not going to give up just because we interrupted him last night. He's too close to his goal to stop now. I looked at Damien, seeing my own fear reflected in his eyes. He's going to try again. Yes, Detective Rodriguez said simply. And next time, he might not wait for you to be alone. The safe house was a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that looked completely forgettable from the outside. Detective Rodriguez had driven us there herself, taking a circuitous route that included 3 unnecessary stops and 2 complete circles around shopping centers to make sure we weren't being followed. The department uses this for witness protection cases, she explained as she handed me the keys. It's clean, secure, and off any records that could be accessed through normal channels. The apartment smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and air freshener, but it was clean and anonymous. Damien immediately went to the windows, checking the locks and pulling the curtains closed. I watched him move through the space with practiced efficiency and realized this wasn't new behavior for him. How long have you been living like this? I asked after Detective Rodriguez left. Living like what? Like someone who's always watching for danger, like someone who checks every window and door before he can relax. Damien sank into the cheap sofa, suddenly looking older than his 59 years. Since the letters started getting more personal, maybe 2 years now. 2 years. I tried to imagine living with that level of constant vigilance, that persistent fear. Why didn't you tell me then? When you first realized how serious this was, because I loved you too much to burden you with it. The simple honesty of that statement hit me harder than I expected. So you decided to sacrifice our marriage instead. I decided to sacrifice my happiness to protect yours. He met my eyes, and I saw the depth of pain he'd been carrying alone. Do you think that was easy for me? Do you think I wanted to give up 25 years of marriage, our home, our future together? I sat down across from him, studying this man I thought I knew completely. I spent 3 years thinking you just fell out of love with me. I've never stopped loving you, not for one day. Then why? My voice broke. Why let me believe I wasn't enough anymore? Why let me think I'd somehow failed as a wife? Damien's face crumpled, and I saw tears he'd probably been holding back for years. Because I knew you. I knew if you understood the real situation, you'd insist on staying. You'd want to face it together as a team. And I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to you because of my inability to protect you. That should have been my choice to make. You're right. But I was terrified, and terrified people don't always make rational decisions. I thought about all the nights I'd lain awake in my empty house, wondering what I'd done wrong, how I'd lost the love of the man I'd planned to grow old with, the birthday dinners I'd eaten alone, the holidays spent with my sister instead of my husband, the creeping loneliness that had become my constant companion. You broke my heart, I said quietly. I know. I broke mine too. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of 3 years of misunderstanding settling between us. Outside, I could hear traffic and distant voices, the sounds of a world continuing normally while mine had been turned completely upside down. The night you called me, I said finally. How did you know Marcus was going to make his move? Damien pulled out his phone and showed me an app I didn't recognize. Police scanner. But also this. I've been monitoring social media, online forums, anywhere someone might post about planning something. 3 days ago, I found a post on a grief support forum that mentioned the anniversary of a mother's death and finally getting justice. You think that was Marcus? The timing was too coincidental. The post talked about how someone who caused unnecessary suffering needed to understand what loss really meant. It was taken down within hours, but I'd already screenshot it. He showed me the image on his phone. The post was rambling, barely coherent, but certain phrases jumped out at me. She needs to pay. 16 years of planning. October 15th will be different this year. You connected that to me based on this? I connected it to the anniversary of Eleanor Holloway's death, and to the pattern of escalation I'd been tracking in the surveillance of your house. Someone had been getting bolder, staying longer, taking more risks. I stared at the screenshot, at the barely contained rage hidden in those typed words. He really blames me for his mother's death. Some people need someone to blame when tragedy strikes. It's easier than accepting that sometimes bad things just happen. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rodriguez. They found him. I felt my heart stop. Marcus? She wants us to come to the station. They have him in custody. The drive to the police station felt like it took hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes. My hand shook the entire way, and I couldn't decide if I was relieved or terrified. Part of me wanted to see Marcus Holloway, to look into the eyes of the man who'd stolen my peace of mind and nearly destroyed my marriage. Another part of me never wanted to be in the same building as him. Detective Rodriguez met us in the lobby. We got him about an hour ago. He was at the storage unit where he'd been keeping his surveillance materials. Apparently, he went back to retrieve something. What? Photos. Specifically photos of you sleeping that he'd taken through your bedroom window. He seemed to consider them particularly important. The violation of that hit me like a physical blow. Someone had been watching me in my most vulnerable moments, documenting my private life for his own twisted purposes. Where is he now? In an interview room. He's been asking to see you. I felt Damien tense beside me. Absolutely not. I want to see him, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Marta, no. You don't need to put yourself through that. I need to understand. I need to look at him and try to comprehend how giving his mother insulin according to doctor's orders turned into 16 years of stalking. Detective Rodriguez studied my face. Are you sure? He's not what you might expect. What do you mean? He's calm, rational even. He speaks about you like he knows you personally, like you've been having a relationship all these years. That was somehow more disturbing than if he'd been raving and obviously mentally ill. I want to see him. The interview room was small and sterile, with one-way glass that allowed me to observe without being seen. Marcus Holloway sat at a metal table, his hands folded calmly in front of him. He looked older than his 54 years, with thinning hair and the pale complexion of someone who spent too much time indoors. But his eyes were what caught my attention. They were focused, intelligent, and completely without remorse. Detective Rodriguez sat across from him, conducting what appeared to be a routine interview. But I could hear every word through the speakers in the observation room. Why now, Marcus? She was asking. Why did you decide to act on October 15th? Because that's when she killed my mother, he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. 16 years ago exactly. It seemed appropriate that she should understand what loss feels like on the same day. But your mother died from complications of diabetes. She was very sick. She died because that nurse gave her the wrong medication. My mother was getting better, and then she gave her something that made her worse. I watched him speak, looking for signs of delusion or mental illness, but he seemed completely convinced of his version of events. In his mind, I was a murderer who'd escaped justice for 16 years. Tell me about the photographs, Detective Rodriguez said. Marcus's expression softened, becoming almost tender. I needed to document how she was living, whether she was taking care of herself, whether she seemed sorry for what she'd done. And what did you conclude? She was living a normal life. Working, sleeping, going about her business like she hadn't destroyed mine. Like my mother's life meant nothing. So you decided to change that. I decided to help her understand. Sometimes people need to experience loss before they can truly comprehend the pain they've caused others. The casual way he discussed planning my abduction, possibly my murder, was more chilling than any ranting would have been. This wasn't someone who'd snapped under pressure. This was someone who'd spent 16 years methodically planning revenge. Did you have help? Detective Rodriguez asked. Marcus hesitated for the first time. I don't know what you mean. Your surveillance was very detailed. You knew about schedule changes, personal appointments, even when Mrs. Wilson would be out of town. That suggests you had access to information most people wouldn't have. I'm very observant. Where did you get her work schedule, Marcus? Another pause. People talk. You'd be surprised what you can learn just by listening. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. Who were you listening to? Marcus looked directly at the one-way mirror, almost as if he could see me watching. Some people understand justice. Some people believe that when someone causes unnecessary suffering, there should be consequences. Give me a name, Marcus. I think I'd like to speak to a lawyer now. The interview ended abruptly, leaving more questions than answers. I stood in the observation room, staring at this man who'd been the shadow over my life for 16 years, and felt an odd sense of deflation. I'd expected a monster, but Marcus Holloway just looked like a sad, broken man who'd never learned to process grief in a healthy way. He's not going to give up his accomplice, Detective Rodriguez said, joining us in the observation room. So we still don't know who at the hospital was helping him? We're working on it. Now that we have Marcus in custody, we can trace his communications, track his movements. If someone was feeding him information, we'll find them. I looked at Damien, who'd been unusually quiet during the interview. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about the 3 years we lost because I was too afraid to trust you with the truth. We can't change that now. No, but we can decide what happens next. He took my hand, his grip warm and steady. Marta, I know I have no right to ask this after what I put you through, but when this is over, when Marcus is in prison and whoever helped him is caught, would you consider giving us another chance? I looked at this man who'd sacrificed everything to protect me, who'd lived with fear and loneliness because he couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to me. The anger I'd carried for 3 years was still there, but it was mixed now with understanding, with recognition of the impossible choice he'd faced. I don't know, I said honestly. We've both changed. I've learned to live independently, and you've learned to live with secrets. I'm not sure we can go back to who we were. I don't want to go back, Damien said. I want to go forward. Together this time, with complete honesty. Before I could answer, Detective Rodriguez's radio crackled to life. Rodriguez, we need you in interview room 2. The suspect is asking for Mrs. Wilson again. What does he want now? He says he has something important to tell her, something about the person who's been helping him. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new house, watching Damien hang curtains in the living room. Not my house or his house, but ours. A fresh start in a neighborhood where Marcus Holloway had never set foot, where no shadows from the past could follow us. The revelation about who had been helping Marcus still sent chills through me when I thought about it. Dr. Sarah Kim, the psychiatrist I'd trusted with some of my most difficult cases, had been feeding him information for over 2 years. Her motive was as twisted as Marcus's obsession. She blamed me for the suicide of a patient we'd both treated, convinced that I'd been too focused on physical symptoms to recognize the depth of his mental anguish. She'd seen Marcus as a kindred spirit, someone else who understood that I needed to be held accountable for my perceived failures. Together, they'd built a case against me that existed only in their damaged minds, but had nearly cost me everything. "How's this?" Damien called from the living room, stepping back to examine his handiwork. I walked over to inspect the curtains, a soft blue that matched the throw pillows I'd chosen the week before. "Perfect. You're getting good at this domestic stuff." "I've had a good teacher." It had taken us 4 months of couples therapy to get to this point, to a place where we could joke about curtains and throw pillows like a normal couple. The road back to trust hadn't been easy. There were nights when I'd wake up angry all over again about the years we'd lost, days when Damien's protective instincts felt more like control than care. But Dr. Martinez, our therapist, had helped us understand that we weren't trying to rebuild our old marriage. We were creating something entirely new, a partnership between two people who'd learned the hard way that love without honesty wasn't sustainable, and protection without communication was just another form of abandonment. "I have something for you," Damien said, reaching into his pocket. My heart skipped, wondering if this was the moment he'd been hinting at for weeks. We'd talked about remarriage, but carefully, without pressure, acknowledging that both of us needed to be sure we were ready. Instead of a ring, he pulled out a small silver key. "What's this for?" "The safety deposit box at First National. I want you to have access to everything. Financial records, insurance policies, even the file I kept on Marcus's surveillance. No more secrets, no more information you don't have." I took the key, feeling its small weight in my palm. It was more meaningful than any piece of jewelry could have been. This was Damien's way of saying he trusted me completely, that he'd learned from his mistakes. "Thank you," I said, standing on my toes to kiss him softly. "There's something else in there, too," he said, his voice suddenly nervous. "Something I've been waiting for the right moment to give you. Damien, it's not what you think, or maybe it is. I don't know anymore." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our early dating days when he was trying to work up courage to tell me something important. "I bought it 3 months before I asked for the divorce. I was going to give it to you for our 25th anniversary. But then everything fell apart." I could see the pain in his eyes, the memory of that terrible time when he'd been forced to choose between his marriage and my safety. "You don't have to tell me this," I said gently. "Yes, I do, because it's part of being completely honest." He took my hands in his. "It's a ring, not an engagement ring. We were already married. It was supposed to be a promise ring, a symbol that after 25 years, I was as committed to you as the day we first said our vows." I felt tears start to form. "And instead, you had to leave me. Instead, I had to make the hardest decision of my life. And I've regretted it every day since." We stood there in our new living room, surrounded by boxes we were still unpacking, holding on to each other like we were afraid the other might disappear. The afternoon sun streamed through our new blue curtains, casting everything in a soft, hopeful light. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we take it one day at a time. We keep talking, keep being honest, keep building something better than what we had before." "And the ring?" Damien smiled, the first truly relaxed smile I'd seen from him in months. "The ring stays in the safety deposit box until you're ready to see it. If you're ever ready. No pressure, no expectations, just love and patience and all the time in the world." My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rodriguez. The trial was set to begin in 2 months, and she wanted to schedule time to prepare my testimony. Marcus Holloway had pleaded not guilty, maintaining his delusion that he'd been seeking justice rather than committing stalking and attempted kidnapping. Dr. Kim had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testifying against him, though she'd lost her medical license and would never practice again. "Are you nervous about the trial?" Damien asked, reading my expression. "A little, but mostly I'm relieved. After 16 years, Marcus will finally face consequences for what he did. And after 3 years, we finally have the truth. All of it? I thought about everything we'd learned, all the secrets that had been revealed, all the pain that had been caused by well-meaning lies and twisted obsessions. Enough of it. Enough to move forward. That evening, we had dinner with Sarah and her husband Tom. My sister had been my rock during the worst of the revelations about Marcus, never once making me feel like I should have seen the signs or could have prevented what happened. "You two look happy," she observed, passing the salad bowl across the table. "We're getting there," I said, glancing at Damien. "It's hard work, rebuilding trust after everything that happened." "The best things usually are," Tom said. "Look at us, 23 years of marriage, and we're still figuring each other out." "The difference is you've been figuring each other out together," Damien said. "We lost 3 years where we were apart, growing and changing without each other. Now we have to learn who we became during that time." "And do you like who you became?" Sarah asked me. I considered the question seriously. The woman I was now was stronger than the one who'd been married to Damien before, more independent, more willing to ask for what I needed, less likely to accept protection at the expense of honesty. "I do," I said. "I like her more than I expected to, and I think she's better equipped to be in a partnership with this version of Damien." "This version?" Damien raised an eyebrow. "The one who's learned that love means trusting your partner to handle difficult truths. The one who's realized that protecting someone sometimes means letting them choose their own level of risk." After dinner, Damien and I walked through our new neighborhood, taking the long way home. The houses were smaller than our old one, the yards more modest, but there was something peaceful about the tree-lined streets and the sound of children playing in backyards. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The house, the life we had before?" "Sometimes. But I don't miss the illusion that everything was perfect. I don't miss not knowing that you were sacrificing your happiness for mine. Even if my intentions were good? Especially because your intentions were good. It made the betrayal hurt worse, knowing that you'd lied to me out of love rather than selfishness." We stopped in front of our house, looking up at the warm light spilling from the windows we'd left on. It looked like home already, more than my old house ever had after the divorce. "Marta," Damien said, his voice serious, "I need you to know something. If we do this, if we rebuild our marriage, I will never make a unilateral decision about our safety again. Whatever we face together. Even if you think you're protecting me? Especially then, because the last 3 years taught me that protecting you from the truth just protects you from being able to make informed choices, and you deserve better than that." I looked at this man who'd learned to value my autonomy as much as my safety, who'd been willing to lose everything rather than see me hurt, who was now committed to never making that choice again. "I love you," I said simply. "Not the man you were, not the marriage we had, but who we are now and what we're building together. I love you too, all of you, your strength, your independence, your refusal to be protected from your own life." As we walked up the front steps of our new house, I thought about the safety deposit box key in my purse, about the ring waiting there whenever I was ready for it, about the trial that would finally close the chapter on Marcus Holloway's obsession. But mostly, I thought about tomorrow, about waking up in a house where honesty lived alongside love, where protection and partnership could coexist, where two people who'd learned hard lessons about trust were committed to doing better. Inside, Damien locked the door behind us, not out of fear, but out of habit. The kind of normal, everyday security that couples take for granted when they're not living under the shadow of a stalker's obsession. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing my smile. "Just this. Us. The fact that we can lock our door and not think about anything more threatening than whether we remembered to set the coffee maker for morning. Simple pleasures. The best kind." We turned off the lights and headed upstairs together, two people who'd found their way back to each other through truth instead of protection, through honesty instead of good intentions gone wrong. In the morning, there would be more boxes to unpack, more rooms to arrange, more of the mundane work of building a life together. But tonight, there was just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that whatever came next, we'd face it with open eyes and joined hands. The shadows were finally gone. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.